Good day, folks. This is Sunday, a Sunday edition of geopolitical news with Bob, the mechanic. Bob with a different set of ideas. Bob, who doesn't like our old alliance, especially Russia, doesn't understand it. I think we've given more blood than we did. They've taken a lot more than they've given us. But hey, that's up to our bureaucracy and our team at in the PMO to decide, right? But the Chinese factor continues to be hog headlines all over the place globally, especially after the way Xi's come out and totally unsheathed his intentions and swords and dragon claws. We better be ready, better be careful, right? As Sun Dong, who I thought one of the guys are the exiting ambassador, Chinese ambassador in India, manipulated our media, especially the Indian Express. Let me just tell you that. He gratuitously tells us, let's not interfere in each other's country internal affairs, says China. In what? In Wei's farewell speech, he says Beijing has optimized visa process for India citizens. Now, I don't know, interfere in each other's internal affairs. Well, I guess he's referring to Tibet. But what about his interference in India, right? And as Saibal Das Gupta writes, and this is what we got to be careful about, Xi Jinping, Jack Flashpoint. The Chinese president is getting ready to realize his military ambitions that go beyond Taiwan. The first shot, folks, Ladakh and Arunachal. Just remember Mao's old philosophy that Xi is a student of. Palm is timbered, 5 fingers he wants control of. Nepal he almost has. Bhutan they're going to go after. Then there is Sikkim, there is Ladakh, and there is Arunachal. Then he says China will wage wars in other countries if its investment interests are threatened. This includes the 50 billion CPEC passing through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. I wish them luck. I don't think they have the bandwidth to do it, but let them try, right? That'll be their Waterloo, right? Because their economy, as I know it, is in doldrums. Extreme Beijingoism. That's a new word, right? The Chinese president has promoted officials who have attracted the most criticism against his economic policies and zero COVID controls. These decisions have resulted in the China Enterprise Index tanking 7.3%, the worst since 2008. But Xi is not worried. His focus is security and sovereignty of the nation, which includes Taiwan and may in the future include Indian territories in Arunachal Pradesh and around Ladakh sooner than later. It is now for the US to carefully deal with a warmongering situation or fall prey to its own sense of bravado. Either way, only time will tell. I think the United States is reacting, right? And then Vijay Gokhale, who I singularly hold responsible for having these no summits, right? He was the foreign secretary at that time. Xi and ambassador to China. Before that, he says off and by and for Xi. He says Xi Jinping is putting in place ideology, institutional and coercive instruments that will keep him in power for the foreseeable future, and we will have to deal with him from a long-term perspective. We absolutely will. There are both opportunities and challenges for India. The West may finally understand that they need to diversify their investments and markets, opening real possibilities for India in technology, collaborations, and supply chains. Yet, we should be aware that as the global economy war turns ugly, our star-performing sectors, pharmaceuticals, automobiles, electronics, are still heavily dependent on Chinese imports, and they may use economic coercion to force choices upon us. They most certainly will. And then you have this, China looking to play pack sport at counter-terror UNSC meet in India. This actually sends the entire message. I don't even see why we pussyfoot around China at all, right? Must be scared. I wonder why. Nirupam Subramaniam writes, Myanmar's violent chaos. Multiple battles are raging between the junta and the resistance. The West does not have the bandwidth for Myanmar. ASEAN has been ineffectual. India is treading fine line. Russia and China have rushed in. We got to be careful. This is critical not only for us, but also for the success of Indo-Pacific. China has also stepped into the economic vacuum left by the West. The China-Myanmar economic corridor is going ahead despite local pushback at places. China is now a major cross-border supplier of electricity to Myanmar. Earlier this month, the Chinese-Myanmar joint venture 135 megawatt power plant was inaugurated in Kyaupokhu in Rakhine State, where a Chinese port project is underway. A new train service connecting Western China to the Myanmar border is expected to speed up Beijing's path to the Indian Ocean. China has also supplied JF Thunder fighter aircraft to Myanmar, and according to the Iranaway, the junta has placed orders for Chinese FTC 2000G sets. India obviously can't compete with equipment coming from China, right? We can't be seen as supplying equipment to the junta but junta is losing. That's the important part. And India only has democracy on its side, and it needs to get the weight of the Indo-Pacific group of countries behind this. I mean, it's got to convince the UK, the United States, Australia that without and Japan is already on board, that without Myanmar, this is going to be difficult, right? Jaishankar discusses Indo-Pacific, Ukraine with US Foreign Secretary. That's a great thought process, but UK is important to this Indo-Pacific strategy, and the United Kingdom must be used to use its influence in the United States, if it has any left, to bring Myanmar back and democracy back. And India needs to fight for democracy. My seems the air conditioning is off, so my sound quality is improved. So now the next bugbear are China, the other is Russia. Just remember, Russia now is tied at the hip with China. To expect anything from the Russia that goes against China would be extremely, extremely delusional for a foreign policy foreign policy bombs. Right? Russia alerts Rajnath on dirty bomb. He warns against nuclear. Let me know, Russia is lying. Sergei Lavrov again is lying, as is whoever it is. There is no dirty bomb. They're building a scenario to use nuclear on the field, folks. Nuke's not an option, says India after Russian Defense Minister Dayal Singh. Absolutely right. And then what do we have here? We have Putin praises Modi pursuing independent foreign policy despite attempts to stop him. Now here again, Putin is playing to the ego of our prime minister. Unfortunately, the Russians, if you look at the USSR, if you look at documented evidence, shows that the biggest weakness India has is charm offensive, it's flattery, and they love that, and they get nothing in return. Right? And this is the view from Samarkand, and India must put its hands in. The view from Samarkand, Central Asia has become a battleground for US and China, and India can come out on the right side. The Samarkand declaration describing Central Asia as the core of the SCO also reflects on the challenges and aspirations common to South Asia. This includes stabilizing Afghanistan. The US strategy to recognizes that a secure and stable Central Asia would contribute directly to the US counter-terrorism effort, and a secure and stable Afghanistan should be top priority for the region. Facing serious divisions within, the China-led SCO does not have an ostensible anti-US tilt. However, competition between the US and China around the Indo-Pacific has eclipsed the competition spanning across an arc of Central Asia, Afghanistan and Pakistan. This arc is also critical to Chinese security interests and to India. This is India's outer security periphery. Just remember that. The joint China-Pakistan moves include consistent hardening of the LAC with India and putting a technical hold on UN designation of Pakistan-backed terror operatives, including the mastermind of the Mumbai attack, Sajid Mir. The recent docking of Chinese-built frigate PNS Taimur at the Colombo port and China's spy ship Yuan Bang 5 at the Hambantota port appears to be aimed at spreading their footprints in the Indian Ocean region and must be stopped. And we, like I said, we need legs. Legs is the British, the French, the United States, Australia. Folks, my question to you after this section is, what do you think? Is India's interest better served with the United States or better served with Russia? And let's not get into, folks, into balance. There is nothing called balance. If you look at history, there has never been a balance. Never. We just pretend otherwise delusionally. Cheers. So this is an important section. People figure why I just don't do one topic, because these guys are, geopolitics are interlinked. What's happening in the United States, what's happening in Russia, what's happening in China, it all comes together every week, right? So you've got to debate all three. See, when the United States foreign press is definitely talking about unsheathing of the sword from Xi. I had a lot of worries. Now finally, I think the companies, Western companies, have realized that there's really no future. But what is the consequential relationship, as I always said, is the United States. But when I see this, I'm a little disappointed with the United States. Veteran US diplomat Jones interim envoy to India 6 in 21 months. So that's a shame, because a permanent person who has direct connections to the White House actually helps. Then you have, this is an important point, because I just saw a friend of mine who's now head of investment, Penang, and she's talking about the end of manufacturing. So what does Penang do? Because Penang is one of the hubs of technical innovation, technical manufacturing, IT manufacturing. So she's talking about fintech and she's talking about digitization. And hey, here we have the edge over the rest of the world, including China and the Western world. It's exporting digital India, the Seema Sirohi. The IMF has blogged about it. Banque de France wrote a bulletin, and Forrester called it transformational. World Bank President David Malpass wants India to showcase it to the wider world. It's the story of India's digital payment revolution, a public good gone viral and taking millions of cash-obsessed Indians straight into the digital realm. It happened mainly because the government laid down the basic infrastructure and let people play. Enlightened policy met demand, creating a situation where the cliche actually works, a win-win scenario. The backbone was the UPI, a real-time interbank money transfer system using mobile apps that allowed India to leapfrog ahead because people embraced it with both arms. UPI's ferocious growth, 3 times the total transactions of the Western world, 3 times, folks, gives India a legit bragging right as a fintech leader. So this is something that Malaysia also needs to come to us and learn. And here is where we need to play a huge role, and a huge opportunity exists. Chipping away at Beijing, the US restriction on China access to US semiconductor technology will have pushbacks, but the United States, in my opinion, will win. The new rules aim to leverage US dominance to cripple Chinese efforts at developing advanced chips and may face Beijing's embargo on rare earth permanent magnets, possibly will. The US, it would seem, is determined to press with its policy of containing China's technological advance. Even if American corporations have to pay a high price, it remains to be seen if Beijing is willing to add to the losses it is already suffering by responding with a counter embargo. It probably will, because it really doesn't care, right? She doesn't care. He just wants control, right? Then you have US, China are battling for semiconductor supremacy. They absolutely are. This is written by Pranay Kothsani and Abraham Manchi. In his report, the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China last week, Xi Jinping spoke of 9 innovation areas where China achieved major success. But there was one notable omission: semiconductors. Decreasing dependence on foreign companies for chips is a critical pillar of China's quest for self-reliance and strength in science and technology. Its own semiconductor ecosystem has come a long way over the past decade, but the omission suggests that semiconductors continue to remain weak link in China's impressive technology stack. Absolutely. Hence, it is not surprising that the United States, US has once again chosen semiconductor export control to counter China. Okay, US has formally shifted its goal from outpacing China to actively denying it access to advanced chips. Right. The geopolitical impact of the new US controls is perhaps the most significant. The US and China semiconductor ecosystem might recover, but this move is a critical juncture in technology geopolitics. Right? India must attempt to become a vital node in semiconductor ecosystem and build strong links with states that share its interests and values and with which it enjoys economic complementaries. Just remember, economic complementaries. You don't enjoy them with China for sure. So your complementaries are Taiwan, United States, and the West, right? And when you see this, Apple India's business grows 45% to 33,000 crores in FY22. It shows you something. The United States technology giants are looking at India to replace, you got it right, China, and they're having a fair amount of success. 3 cheers. And the question again is that I ask, whose our interest is served better, by the United States or the combination of Russia and China? So in conclusion, this is the important part where I tell you why it's always now important for India to move its supply of equipment, armed equipment, defense equipment from Russia. But see, when we talk about non-aligned, easy to say, those words are easy, non-aligned. But when you have 80% or 90% of your supply chain or your equipment coming from the USSR in the old days, what did you think? We were aligned. Obviously, we really didn't have a choice, right? IF to progressively induct C-295 airlifters from September 23rd, and this is a joint venture, first private sector joint venture between Tata's and Airbus, an important play. And then you have this, Saudi Crown Prince plans mid-November visit to India. Expanding energy investment and security ties may top the agenda of visit, which comes ahead of the G20 summit. This is one of the few places that we really made a lot of progress under this government, right? Which the previous government was unable to do. Economic headwinds are hurting the world, as Frank F. Islam writes. And what are the headwinds? Attributable to multiple causes. One is inflation. Inflation caused by supply chain disruption and increasing interests in the United States. Consider the energy crisis. Now that what's happening with the Ukraine and Russia putting the tap off, and now prices being increased by the Middle East producers. And then there is the debt crisis. Most of the debt of the middle and in low income countries is owned by China and private creditors and investors. So it requires financial discipline on the part of the debtor nations as well as substantial outside help to get out of the debt trap. Not going to happen with China, folks. We've seen that. Especially you've seen it with Sri Lanka, right? Taking this into account, most participants at the IMF World Bank Group event knew that options were limited. Consequently, they heeded the message delivered by IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. Buckle up and keep going. They concentrated their attention not on grandiose, but on preparing the world for the bumpy ride ahead. We better be ready, folks. India better be ready. Jai Hind. Jai Hind.